we were talking about the worship and the worship around the throne of God. The seraphim are there, and they're crying out, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty," 24/7.
Yes.
And so the speaker took us to the time when we would be in heaven and we would be talking to them. And we might share a testimony of what, something that happened on earth, something that we did. And, I'm sorry you missed out on that. And they're like, "No, we're good. We're good. We got to stand in the presence of God for all eternity. Just to be in His presence." So, yeah, to be in His presence, that is our desire.
Dale, I want to say something. What you just said, the picture I saw is when we give that testimony, I saw the seraphim all of a sudden fall on their face and start worshiping at that moment. It was like every time they would hear of something good, they would fall on their face and worship.
Right.
It's automatic, spontaneous worship because of the goodness.
And it's dynamic. It's not like that's, it gets old ever for them, because God is constantly changing and constantly doing things. And when they hear about something that God just did on the earth, it's like, "Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, what?" And you bow down again, because it's like, wow, I never even thought of that, and here's God doing it again. It's like, it's something new, and praise God for that. Never ending, never boring, never sitting there and wondering, when is this going to end? This is just, no, that's, wow. Yes.
So if you don't like praise and worship here on earth, you better change that.
That's very true. That is very true. Yes, very true. Whew.
You may not end up there.
I have something that I want to share, and I admit I feel inadequate today in doing this, but I know that God is here. God can speak through me. I don't know, as I putting this together, and I felt more like I was doing it, and I was asking God to bless it. Have you ever been there? You've done something, and you ask God, "Okay, God, you got to bless this now." Instead of God leading you through it and directing you, right? So that's where I'm coming from a little bit today. Okay, He's definitely giving me some stuff in here.
It's all good.
But I'm just prefacing, where I am at. Okay. All right. So the title is "The Rest Is Up to Us." That has two definitions, really, as far as rest is concerned. The rest is up to us, meaning we have work to do. The rest is up to us. But the other rest, being able to enter into His rest and actually just calm ourselves and actually rest, that's also up to us. We also have some decisions and choices that we make to allow that to happen in our lives. So I'm going to look at the Israelites entering the Promised Land. So before, and I don't have to go through background with you guys. You know the Bible. So I don't have to set this up for you and everything that happened in the 40 years and all of that, and why they were there and why they had to go through all of that. But here they are, by faith, getting ready to cross that swollen Jordan River. I think it was a 3-day warning, wasn't it? They came through and they said, in 3 days we're crossing. And so they were getting ready. They're packing all their stuff up. And the priests are the ones that are going to lead them. And they get out there and they have to, step right into the water. I mean, there's faith going on in that, right? I look at that as that's salvation for us. That's not entering heaven. I think there are songs out there where you cross over Jordan, you're going to be in heaven. Well, for them, this actually wasn't heaven, was it? There were battles to fight. They had all kinds of work to do. So they crossed into the Promised Land, flowing with milk and honey, and it's like, okay, we made it. yay, we're here. It's like, well, okay, you're here, but God's got a plan. God's got a plan, you know. Yeah, there's giants in the land, right? So it's becoming a Christian is the way I'm looking at this, and that it takes faith in God, and the rest is up to us. And we're going to face all kinds of challenges. So I'm going to go through the first 4 cities that they faced, and the first was at Gilgal. First thing they faced was the circumcision at Gilgal. Circumcision is a cutting away of the flesh to be able to walk in the fullness of the Spirit. Cutting away the flesh to be able to walk in the fullness of the Spirit. The things of the flesh that were so important to us are no longer important to us. The things that we listen to, the things that we look at, the things that occupy our mind, all of that has changed. We are different. We have a different priority. Our focus is different. And the circumcision for them, I mean, that was an act of obedience to God. They didn't circumcise for those 40 years that they were in the wilderness. So when they came out, God didn't have them do that before he would let them cross the Jordan River, by the way, right? I mean, they moved into salvation without having to clean up everything or get everything right in their life. They got to cross the Jordan River. We have salvation without having to do all of that. And then God starts working on that. Looking for obedience in our lives to be able to take care of the things that he still needs to take care of. So, this is when circumcision took place. This is also where they were able to celebrate Passover and eat some of the produce of the land. And if they looked around, the cloud was gone. There was no longer any manna. This was a huge change. They're going to have to plant and harvest food. This was a huge change. They're moving from the normal of the last 40 years in the wilderness to now, wow. Now what? What's going to happen? Some of this stuff that we were doing doesn't work anymore. I don't want to say, the buzzword out there, it's a new normal, right? We hear that way too much, I think, almost. It's a new normal today, But how do they even get there? How does that happen? Without obedience, without God. This huge change. And again, they can't do the things that they did before. And one of my thoughts on this was, when David was going up against Goliath, he had his sling and his 5 stones. He went running at Goliath. He never showed up at any other battle. Can you imagine all of his men, his mighty men, gathering together, getting ready to go into battle, and David shows up with his sling and a bunch of stones to lead them into battle? No. He had a different weapon. Different things we face take, and God leads us to it, takes different weapons, the weapons of our warfare. All right. We move to Jericho. Jericho was a fortress that was tightly shut up. Chapter 6, right? Going into Jericho. And it's like, okay, God, just get rid of this fortress. Get rid of this giant. James was here Wednesday and he talked about giants. And I missed the front end of that, but it was really good what I got to hear. So it's like, okay, we'll just pray and God will take care of this. And yes, we do want to give it to him, but just like the Israelites, we have a part that we have to do, right? God had promised to drive out all the inhabitants of the land. So reading Deuteronomy 31:3 through 6, the Lord your God himself will cross over ahead of you. He will destroy these nations before you, and you will take possession of their land. Joshua will also cross over ahead of you, as the Lord said. And the Lord will do to them what he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites, whom he destroyed along with their land. The Lord will deliver them to you, and you must do to them all that I have commanded you. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. So we can stand on his promises. But we can't just stand there. We can't just... We have a part. The rest is up to us. We choose to go out and march around Jericho. That's obedience. And they did. They obeyed. Once a day for 6 days, and then 7 times on the 7th day. And why? Why did it have to be set up like that? I don't have a definite answer. I have an idea, or one that I'm going to share. That strongholds take time. You don't just go in and pull down a stronghold in somebody's life. And you know, if you've done deliverance praying, some people have strongholds that they maybe don't even want to give up. They're hanging on to that. And all the prayer you have is not going to break through that until they're ready. So okay, maybe, this is strongholds take time. Maybe Rahab needed time to get her family in. Remember Rahab, right? She hid the spies, and so now she has favor, and she's got her house in the wall, and maybe she needed some time to get her family in. And then I thought of a song. I asked my wife if I should sing this morning, and she wasn't sure. I'm just going to sing this part of it. Wait a little longer, please, Jesus. There are so many wandering out in sin. Just a little longer, please, Jesus. A few more days to get our loved ones in.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Yes, we need that. There are verses and all of that you can look at. You remember that song?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. Many of you do.
No, but
Okay.
it's good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, a few more days. For me, this is what I feel like I'm coming up against. Is my stronghold is my kids not serving God, and I know almost everyone in the room has that situation that we are praying and wanting our kids to be, pursuing God like we are pursuing God, even if they are, at least Christians, and they are serving God, but they're not pursuing God like we would want. And that's what I want for my kids. And I want that to happen in my lifetime, so I can have conversations with them and pray with them and do all the things that, Lord, so you're hearing our hearts cry right now.
Yes.
You're hearing that,
Yes.
Lord.
Yes,
That's what we
Lord.
want.
Yes, Lord.
In 2 Peter 3:9, the Lord is not slow in keeping his promises. Some understand slowness, but instead he is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. The next verse 10, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night. So he is not slow in keeping his promises. Anybody have the opinion that sometimes you think he is? I'm just saying.
Yes.
Sometimes I think, it's there. It's like, okay, God, it's like, but it's his timing, right? And we have to continue to have faith. And so we might think he's slow, but then unexpectedly, it happens. It could happen today.
Yeah.
I mean, it's coming, could happen. But I'm also saying that our kids, or whoever we're praying for, our loved ones, it could happen today.
Yeah.
That the Spirit of God comes on them and they confess Christ. Yes.
Thank you, Jesus.
So we're marching around Jericho. We're trusting God. And sometimes that means doing foolish things. They had to march around Jericho those 6 days without saying a word. How many of you would struggle to do that? March around there. You got your friends right next to you. Your good friend, it's like, don't say anything. Just keep that mouth shut. Yeah, that'd be hard. It'd be hard for me too. I'm not I'm a little bit social, so yeah, that would be hard. Sometimes we don't see the end from the beginning, and I'm sure they didn't. It's got to, it's got to be like they're questioning, why are we getting up and going out there and doing that again? Like, yeah. But when you know that God is in it, He is faithful. We know that. We know He is faithful. He is our strength. We can be strong and courageous. Joshua 1:7-9. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey the law of my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the left or the right, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditating on it day and night. I see that as worship. Meditating on it, worshiping with it. So that you may be careful to do everything written in it. That's obedience. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Worship with obedience. Created victory for them at Jericho. And it was a great victory. But we can't stay at Jericho. If we want to possess everything that God has for us, we can't stay there. They couldn't stay there. That's not what God's plan was for them. Victories are great, but we have to move on. So we move on to Ai, where hundreds of thousands of people and soldiers did absolutely the right thing, and one did not. We all know the story, so I'm not going to spend the time necessarily on the story, but I did look at it this way because I used to teach statistics, and I've actually shared something similar to this in statistics, that if we did 999 things out of 1,000 right for God, that means we're doing 99.9% right. If that was good enough, in the next 60 minutes, I know it's Sunday, but in 60 minutes, 18,000 pieces of mail would be mishandled. There's 1,300,000 phone calls made every minute, and 1,300 phone calls would be misdirected. And this is the one that, 385 babies are born each day in the world. Almost 2,700 babies would be given to the wrong parents each week.
Wow.
If they were just 99.9% correct. So you can think of your family history and think of how different you were from your brothers and sisters.
I actually was brought the wrong baby.
You were? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so see, it's happening. They can be as accurate as they think they can be. And we're going to talk later about how they're going to chip them pretty soon. So I actually have that in my notes. It's a little later. I don't know if I'll get to that. What time is it? I didn't even look at what time I started.
1:20.
Oh my goodness. Okay. No, we're good.
You got another 40.
Okay. All right. And we'll probably get through it. I have another example of this, just small thing. There was a father that was struggling with his teenage kids, wanting to go out and do things. They were going to church and they were good kids and all that, but there were just some things that they, it was like, why can't we do this? Why can't we? So he decided to have a family meeting, and he baked a batch of brownies. Maybe you've heard this example, but he baked a batch of brownies and had them sitting on a plate there, and so all the kids came, and so of course they were wanting to grab him right away, and he said, wait a minute, let's just talk this through a little bit about what you want to do and how it's going to affect your life. And he used the brownies, I won't tell the whole story, but he used the brownies, and preparing the brownies, as he was doing that, they had a dog, and the dog had taken a poop in the backyard, and he went out and he grabbed some of that, and he threw that into the brownie mix, and mixed that into the brownies. They looked great. They looked good. Everything about them was just fine. But it was just that little thing that was different, that even though they looked good, smelled good, everything, So anytime they brought up the fact that they wanted to go and do something with their friends that wouldn't be pleasing to God, he said, you know, do I need to go make some more brownies? And they knew exactly what he was saying. Knew exactly what he was saying. It's like, no, we can't mix that evil in with the good. We can't do that. You can't allow that in your life to occupy part of your life, because as soon as that starts, as soon as you start down that road, and I wish I had that story when my kids were younger, but I would have done it. We had a dog. I would have done it. All right, so we're at Ai, and everyone but one person does everything right. The sin of Achan affected the whole assembly of God's people, and 36 soldiers died. It also affected his family, as they were all stoned to death. The sin in our lives affects those around us. Yeah. Sins of the heart or the mind, like unforgiveness, bitterness. I have a friend that's family, the whole family, friends of ours that attend the Stratford Church, Stratford Assembly of God Church, and he's the deacon there, and he preaches, and there's a woman in the church that everybody knows that she has this unforgiveness in her life, that she just will not forgive some family member. I don't remember the exact story, but it has affected her. That unforgiveness and bitterness has affected her to the point where she has like crippling arthritis in her joints and bones and everything, and she will come forward to be prayed for, come up to the altar and expect the deacons to, you know, pray over her and that she will get healed. And everyone knows her story, and they know that she will not forgive that person. And that is, you know, as we all would know, it's keeping her from being able to receive from God. So, yeah, tolerating sin in our lives, no matter how small, I guess is where I'm going with that, no matter how small, is going to rob us of what God has for us. And then the sin is gone, and there's a great victory also at Ai, and I threw Bethel in there as well. It's like the close proximity. So the word spreads of what God has done, and all the kings hear about it, and they're afraid of Israel. I just want to also comment that God did this a different way. They didn't go out there and start marching around that city to claim that city. God has different ways of doing things, right? I mean, he told them, okay, let's do an ambush this time. Let's bring people in around the backside, and when they all come out of the city, you rush in, and the city was conquered. So we can't expect God to show up in the same way and do the same thing every time. It's not like we figure out a formula if we do this and do this and do this. And that's right. I grew up in a church where, well, we need a program. How do we, what kind of a program will make this happen, and then it's successful, and it's like, okay, we're going to roll this out. Everybody, all the churches are going to do the same program, and everybody, everybody's going to get blessed. God's going to show up, and it's like, yeah. That's not God. That's not, listening to his voice and doing things the way he would want us to do them. Yeah. So, next city, just southwest of Ai and Bethel, was Gibeon. And I'm going to read a little bit of this as well. In chapter 9, 1 through 6. Now when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, the kings in the hill country and the western foothills and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea, they list all the names of them, they came together to wage a war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread in their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua at the camp of Gilgal and said to him and the Israelites, "We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." And the Israelites said to them, "But perhaps you live near us. So how can we make a treaty with you?" And they said, "We are your servants." And saying that to Joshua, Joshua asked, "Who are you and where do you come from?" They answered, Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God. We have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, the Sihon and Og. And our elders and all those living in the country said to us, take provisions for your journey and go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants, make a treaty with us. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you, but now see how dry and moldy it is. And these wineskins that we filled were new, but see how cracked they are. And our clothes and sandals are worn out by a very long journey. The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a peace treaty, or a treaty of peace with them, and let them live. And the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. And I'm going to pick that up again in just a second, but the sad thing here, of course, we all know, is that they didn't inquire of the Lord. They didn't ask God, what to do. They're just going to move ahead. They're making a decision by what they could see and what they were told. And they had never seen wore-out clothes and wore-out sandals. 40 years in the wilderness, nothing ever wore out. So it's like, wow, they must have come from a really long ways away to have, their perception of this was different, right? Because they'd never seen that before. Their stuff didn't wear out. And here they have all this worn out stuff that they're wearing. And I also had the thought that my wife would attest to this, that I'm kind of a pack rat. And I think I've kind of turned her into a kind of a pack rat as well. In her about 22 years of marriage now. But somebody had to be a pack rat. They're hanging on to old stuff, even though it's worn out and broken and everything. They're not throwing that away. I still have those old sandals, right? So, I'm not getting rid of those old sandals. They're still here, and so somebody did that, because otherwise they wouldn't have had them to wear and to actually, do this deception, right? Yeah. But how often does it get us into trouble that we depend on our own human wisdom? We look at a situation and we judge it, and we don't even pause to ask God.
Yeah.
We just move ahead, and they took the oath, and then 3 days later, it's picking it up in verse 16, 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. So there's set out, and on the third day they came to the cities that they owned, but the Israelites did not attack them because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders, but all the leaders answered, we have given them our oath by the Lord, the God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now. They found out they'd been lied to. Does that cancel the oath? I'm not sure how our legal system would deal with this today, but I think it would. I think the deception there they would look at that and it's like, no, you don't have a right. You lied on your application, or you did this, or you falsified that, and it's not valid. But they took an oath before God. Even though they were deceived, they honored their word. So, looking at these cities, and I'm wrapping up the first part of this, as far as the rest being up to you and the work that we have to do. It's kind of like, okay, where are you? Are you at Gilgal, where you're going through huge changes in your life? Maybe you're at Jericho, there's a stronghold, and you're marching around for the 1000th time, still praying and still telling God to being faithful in that. Very important, of course. Maybe you're at Ai and struggling and tolerating sin in your life. Small thing, but 99.9% isn't good enough, right? Amen. It's not. God doesn't grade on a curve. And I tell my students that sometimes when they ask, are you going to curve this test? And I was like, I don't know. God doesn't grade on the curve. I mean, you're not, he's not like, oh, you've been pretty good, so yeah, well, I'll let you into heaven. It's like, no, that doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you're at Gibeon and you're feeling like maybe you've been deceived. And I know Christians that have felt like they've been deceived by God because of what they have done in their life, and like they feel that God owes them something, and that God didn't step up at the time that they thought that He would and take care of this situation, and now they're living in that, feeling like God deceived them. Like, God, I did this, and so you're supposed to do that, right? Like we can somehow earn what we get from God. But I'll tell you, I've been there. Yeah. I was attending a summer camp in Wisconsin, and they were doing fundraising for missions, and the goal was $25,000, and they were adding it up, as people made pledges and all that, and I just was sitting back, and God had blessed me with a job that I was making really good money, and I felt like, okay, whatever the shortfall is, that's what I'm supposed to do. And so then they didn't have a total that night, and so the next morning I went over to the office to find out what that was, and I paid that. It was something over $1,000. I don't remember the exact amount, but boy, was I feeling special when I did that. God, look what I just did. And I felt like God owed me something for that. Wow. I'll credit some of that to the way I was raised at church. And the works doctrine, and you do this, and then God's going to bless you and do that. And it's like, that's where I was at. And for a period of time, I also thought, okay, because I did that, then God moved me to, from where I was there, going back to school and doing all of that, and then teaching at Evangel, and it was years before I realized, okay, I didn't do something that deserved all of that. It wasn't me. But there are those that are still in that. I got a chance to share just briefly with the seniors. We had a breakfast kind of thing for the seniors that are graduating this year, and I knew I was going to get a chance to share, and so I just felt like I needed to address that area, because many of them come from Assembly of God churches that probably have heard that works doctrine. And so I led off with, as Jesus was baptized and came up out of the water, God is speaking from heaven saying, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." And I told him, well, at that point, he really hadn't done anything. Yes, he'd lived a sinless life up to that point, but he hadn't done a miracle, he hadn't done anything. But God was pleased with him. And I told him that God is pleased with you. God is pleased with you. You don't have to earn that from God. Yeah. You don't earn that by doing things for Him. But at the end of it, I turned that around and I said, now when you get out there though, and you're in a church, do something. Right? I mean, I did turn that around, but it's not that we're earning anything from God. Right? He is pleased with us. If we know Him, serve Him, He is pleased with us. Yes. All right, we're going to move on to entering God's rest. And so I'm going to read a little bit lengthy, Hebrews 3, if you want to open to that. And into 4. 4 is actually where I'm heading with this, but I kept backing up to see where I could kind of begin, and I kept backing into 3. So starting with verse 7. So the Holy Spirit says, "Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts, as you did in the rebellion during the time of testing in the desert, where your fathers tested and tried me for 40 years, and for the 40 years saw what I did. This is why I was angry with that generation, and I said, their hearts are always going astray, and they have not known my ways. So I declare an oath, in my anger they shall never enter my rest. See to it, brothers, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God, but encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. We have come to share in Christ if we hold firmly till the end the confidence we had at first. As has just been said, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. Who were they who heard and rebelled? Were they not all those Moses led out of Egypt, and with whom he was angry for 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the desert? And to whom did God swear that they would never enter his rest, if not to those who disobeyed? So we see that they were not able to enter because of their unbelief. Starting in chapter 4, therefore, since this promise of entering his rest still stands, let us be careful that none of you be found to have fallen short of it. For we have had the gospel preached to us, just as they did, but the message they heard was of no value to them, because those who heard it did not combine it with faith. Now we who have believed enter that rest, just as God has said. So I declare an oath in my anger, and they will never enter my rest. And yet his work has been finished since the creation of the world." And I'm going to stop there and come back to that area. So God was angry, and they will not go into his rest. But the rest is there. The rest is prepared for us. And that we can have that rest today. Maybe I will just keep reading. I'm going to read from a different translation, picking up with verse 4. In the Holy Writings, he said this about the seventh day when he made the whole world. God rested on the seventh day from all he had made. But God said this about those who turned against him: they will not go into my rest. Those who heard the good news first did not go into his rest. It was because they had not obeyed him. But the promise is still good, and some are going into his rest. God has again set a certain day for people to go into his rest. He says through David many years later, as he said before, if you hear his voice today, do not let your hearts become hard. If Joshua had led those people into God's rest, he would not have told of another day after that. And so God's people have a complete rest waiting for them. The man who goes into God's rest rests from his own work, the same as God rested from his work. Let us do our best to go into that rest, or we will be like the people who did not go in. God's word is living and powerful. It is sharper than a sword that cuts both ways. It cuts straight into where the soul and spirit meet and divides them. It cuts into the joints and bones. It tells what the heart is thinking about and what it wants to do. No one can hide from God. His eyes see everything we do. We must give an answer to God for what we have done. So there's a lot there to unpack, and I'm not really going to do a good job with that. But it's in verse 11. It says, "Let us do our best to go into that rest." That means again that we have something that we have to do to be able to enter that. The rest is there. It's prepared for us. But we have something to do, and I'm not talking about, that rest is when we are in heaven. I'm talking about it as we are right here.
Yes.
It's today. Today that rest is available for us.
Yes.
And all of us have been at that point where we're going through something and we can't rest. whether it's something that God's dealing with us about, or it's family, or it's, whatever it is that just gets to us and keeps us churned up and can't sleep and all of that. We've all gone through that. I heard something recently, and I wanted to share this, and I'm tying this into what we are talking about. But the government in China in 1949 started IDEA training. This is when Mao took over. IDEA training was to give all the way down to the local level, people with authority, or people ended up with authority through this. They ended up in smaller groups, a group setting maybe like this, and they had to tell each other stories. They had to memorize them and say them exactly. And whether they were true or not, it didn't matter. In fact, most of them were lies about what the Communist Party was going to be able to do, and so it was, the indoctrination and all that, whatever you want to call it, but they called it IDEA training. And so in that process, if you couldn't say it exactly right, you were reported on. And this was the whole grabbing of control at that time. Is that, well, you didn't do that right, and so I have to tell on you. And that continued then, where if your neighbor said anything against the Communist Party, you had to tell on them, and the Communist Party would deal with them. That's how they seized control. From that very minor thing, seemingly, of just, repeating a story and memorizing a story, and, if I don't do it right, big deal. But, yes, it was a big deal. It actually allowed them to get control of the entire country by doing that. So, the stories and the memories that you have, that you are telling yourself, rehearsing in your mind, that again could keep you awake. At the conference, we heard this, that there are 4 voices in your head. You talk to yourself. We have that. We have others that talk to us. We have evil, I think you just called it evil, that comes at us. And we have God. 4 different things that you can listen to. And he made one strong point that he had repeated several times, that you should talk to yourself more than you listen to yourself. So if you just listen to yourself about what, and repeat that over and over in your head, bad things sometimes, right? Evil getting in there. I wrote this down. Are you wise enough to give yourself counsel?
No.
What do you think?
No.
Are you wise enough to give yourself counsel? Definitely some days I doubt. I doubt that I am. So then are there others around you that are giving you counsel? And that's biblical, right? That's biblical. We want to have that. So others around you can give counsel. They can speak into our lives, and that's good. Evil, the devil is trying to speak into our lives as well. This group knows all about the demonic and the attacks and all of that. So I don't need to go into detail there. And then listening to God. And I believe it was the same person. I'm not quite sure, but Tim Timberlake, I believe, said this when he got up in the morning. He had 15 minutes. 5 minutes broken into 3 different groups. So 5 minutes he would sit and listen to God. He would listen, just listen. The next 5 minutes he read his Bible. The next 5 minutes, I think, was worship. Like he was, but he wanted his first 15 minutes of the day to be spent with God and listening to God before he listened to anything else. Mm-hmm. Before anything else came at him, whatever the news was from overnight and the bombings, the war, and all the rest of that, he wanted to spend that time with God and give that first 15 minutes. And he's got 4 kids, I think, and his time is in demand for sure, even when he's home. So I kind of challenge myself with that too, and I do get up and have my quiet time every morning. Jean does that as well. But I have to admit that I don't like sit and listen to God. Not for very long anyway. It's like, okay, God, you need, want to share something with me today, and then, a brief pause, and like, okay, I'm not hearing anything. So then I'm into the Word. It's like, okay, maybe you'll speak to me through your Word today. So I want to do that. Even if I've set a timer, I want to give at least 5 minutes to that. And you can change it however you want, or maybe you're not being challenged by that. I don't know, but I was definitely challenged by that. That I want to hear from God. I want to allow Him time to speak to me. And I know that I've gotten too rushed in even like reading through the Bible in a year. I've done that. I've already accomplished that this year once, and I'm pretty much through the New Testament again. But it's like I feel like I need to slow that down. God does speak to me as I'm going through it at that speed, but yeah, I'm gonna slow that down. I feel like my life is so rushed already. I don't need to be rushing through His Word always. And some years, and I'm not trying to brag on myself. I'm just I read it through. I know people that read it more than 3 times a year, and I did 3 last year. But yeah, I'd rather have that communion time with Him. Amen. And Gina's challenged me on that too, so I'll give her credit for speaking into my life and saying what about like just doing different studies or whatever. So back to what we are thinking about, what we allow in our head, these memories, these stories that we're repeating, that maybe is not restful. It's not something that it's keeping you up at night. The devil can use these stories to torment you. And another thing that was said, that it's like when that happens, you can just say, oh, thank you, devil, for reminding me of what Jesus is doing in my life. I thought that was pretty good too. Like, okay, thank you for reminding me about what Jesus is doing, because Jesus is going to be victorious in this area, even if it isn't all settled yet. But, I'm praising Him for what He is doing, and just turn that around on Him. Just when that attack comes, just turn it around and like, well, thank you for reminding me that I need to praise God about what He's doing. And then it's God's Word, it's God's will, it's God's way. Philippians 4:7, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. Do I need to be done? They went upstairs. I got a couple more minutes. I'm on my last page.
Go for it, Dale.
All right. I'm going to skip a couple of verses here, but Proverbs. Well, I've got something here I want to share to you. All right. So Proverbs 19:21. There are many plans in a man's heart, but the Lord's plan, it's the Lord's plan that will stand. Proverbs 24:5. May He give you the desire of your heart and make all your plans succeed. And may we shout for joy over your victory and lift up our banners in the name of our God. In your heart you make plans, but it is the Lord that orders your steps.
Amen.
Psalms 37:23 and 24. The Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in Him. Though he may stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with His hand. And part of Jeremiah's prayer in chapter 10, verse 23, Lord, I know that people's lives are not their own. It is not for them to direct their steps.
Amen.
That's good.
So it's, we could go to Jeremiah 29:11. We all know that the Lord has plans for us, to prosper us, and to not hurt us. And I wanted to read beyond that, though, because sometimes we stop there. So let me read the whole thing, 11 through 13, Jeremiah 29. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart.
Amen.
So what I'm getting at here, we have many plans in our heart, but it's the Lord's plan that will stand. It's Him that is ordering our steps. He is the one that is doing this. And I say this to my freshman class at least, probably 3 or 4 times during the semester, that it's dangerous to pursue what you want at the expense of what God has for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Trying to get them at that age, at freshmen, to, what God is calling you to do is so much more important. That it's dangerous to pursue what you want at the expense of what God has for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's good.
That they will look at what God has laid out. And so I want to live my life where I am willing to put down my agenda and pick up the assignment that God is for my life. Put down my plan and pick up God's plans. Because I know God's plan is going to be better anyway.
Amen.
And at my age, you wouldn't think that I'm still trying to find God's plan for my future, but I am. I know. The world we live in today, you think, it's like you work 40 years for a company, you retire, and you sit back and, wait for the trumpet to sound or go to be with God, right? No, it's not. It's not. So I want Him to order my steps. And I can look back at my life already and see how God is so faithful and what He has done and how He has directed me and allow Him to continue to do that. That He knows. He knows. Another thing they said in the conference is that we have an audience of one. What we're doing for God is the only thing that's important.
That's right.
Because God is watching us. We have an audience of one. It doesn't matter what other people think about us and what they say about us.
That's right.
How we rehearse that in our mind. Well, what are they thinking? What do they think of me? No, we have an audience of one. And pleasing Him and following Him and looking at what He is doing, that's where it's at. I have one other area that's kind of off the topic a little bit. It is rest, because I looked up rest, right, in the Bible, and I found this as well, and I was like, okay, God, I don't know if I, should be using that or going into this, but we see our world changing. I think you said Wednesday night even that we're moving from the church age into what?
Kingdom.
Kingdom age. Okay. All right. I couldn't remember exactly how that was stated, and I don't. Are there others that are following someone that's saying that? So okay. I guess it slipped past me. I just haven't caught it. But so we're in this church age, this age of grace, when even as Jesus was crucified, in Luke 23:34, He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And when Stephen was stoned, in the age of grace, in the church age, He said, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. And then we get to Revelation 6:10-12. All those who had been killed cried out with a loud voice, saying, How long will it be before you punish those on earth for killing us? We have stepped into a new age with that. Grace is not there anymore.
I'm not saying it's revenge or whatever, but it's like, okay, Lord, how long? White clothes or white robes were given to each of them, and they were told to rest a little while longer. They were to wait until all the other servants owned by God and their Christian brothers would be killed as they had been, and then the group would be complete. So they're under the altar there, and they're crying out. And then another verse in Revelation 14, I'll start with verse 9. The third angel followed, saying in a loud voice, anyone that worships the beast and his false god and receives the mark on his forehead or hand, he will drink of the wine of the anger of God. It is mixed in full strength in the cup of God's anger. They will be punished with fire and burning sulfur in front of the holy angels and before the Lamb. And the smoke of those who are being punished will go up forever. They have no rest, day and night. And it's because they worshipped the beast and the false god and have received the mark of his name. This is why God's people need to keep true to God's word and stay faithful to Jesus.
Yes.
I was trying to, in one of my classes, I was looking at the different, as I would maybe say, controversial things that were going on in the world. And so I brought up the central bank digital currency thing, and we discussed that. And some of them thought, okay, that would be a good thing. We'd eliminate, this and this and this, but the control that they would have with that. And something that I just did this past week was I looked up this idea 2020, ID 2020, so that everyone would have an identification. And their goal is to make that happen by 2030. That everyone would be identified at birth. Which to me, then, that means they're going to put a chip in every baby that's born at that time. I mean, they're already chipping the animals, right? All your animals, probably whatever you own, dog, cat, whatever, got a chip in them. And I see that happening. And they talk about, well, there's like, I forget how many people that don't have any ID. They don't have any identification. There's no way to identify them, and they don't like that. They want to be able to have control, and they won't have control unless they can identify you. So that's something that's coming, and the vaccine passport and other things, but if all that could be just put in a chip and is inside of you, and they can adjust that chip whenever they need to, is that the mark of the beast? And I'm asking as a question. I have some strong feelings that it is, that's the way it's going to happen, and it's coming. I mean, in 10 years, less than 10 years, 8 years, that will be here. That everyone will be required to have this.
That's right.
And they will sell it as how wonderful this will be.
Oh, yeah.
That, no one will ever be lost. We'll know where everybody is because we can tell where you are. Well, they're already tracking you with your phone, right? You go anywhere with your phone, they already know where you've been. I get reports every month that well, on this day you drove to Texas.
Yeah.
I mean, they know. They know exactly where I was, where I've been. And the law can track that down to just even seconds. Because someone that my son knows went to jail, and he's going to serve some time because he was doing some bad things. And they could track him with his phone that, drive-by shooting or whatever, wherever he was. They knew exactly where he was because he had his phone on him. So that's coming, and it won't be in our phones, it'll be actually in us.
Right.
So, yeah. But...
Well, that's what the enemy wants to do.
Yes,
Exactly.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
No, I'm not trying to be that, completely negative all the way through this, right? Because I'm just trying to turn it around with a but. And verse 12 I already read, but this is why God's people need to keep true to God's word and stay faithful to Jesus. In verse 13, and I heard a voice from heaven saying, write these words. From now on, those who are dead, who died belonging to the Lord, will be happy. Yes, says the Spirit. They will have rest from all their work, and all their good things they have done will follow them. So the reward is there. The reward is also given to those that were under the altar. I was able to kind of tie this together too, where they are the ones that are going to rule and reign with Christ for 1,000 years. In Revelation 21 through 4. So that's the reward of where I started there in Revelation 6, of those that were killed during that time. So, yes, we are in a turbulent time. We all know that. But we also know that God is greater than anything that is going on. And He could flip this around. More and more being exposed every day. Stuff is continuing to come out about what people did and what they said and how false it was. And, you know, we just keep praying. Because we know that God's got this.
Yes.
Amen. Amen. I am done.
Wow.
I want to say that's the reason worship is so important, because it keeps us so focused on Him and our hearts so on Him
Yeah.
that then any of these turbulent times aren't going to affect us.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way that we will.
What a great word.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And bad things are going to happen to good people, because they always have. But God is the rewarder,
Yes.
and He keeps good notes.
Yeah.
I remind people that from time to time, when they are really concerned about what the wicked are doing. I said, well, don't be concerned, because God is a righteous judge, and He takes notes.
Yeah.
So the wicked don't get away with anything. And many of you have probably read the scriptures, books that have been written by people who God has taken to heaven and who has escorted through hell. Hell is not a nice place. And if you read carefully, I don't think I would want my worst enemy to end up in hell.
No.
I mean, it is worse than we can imagine. And it is forever.
It wasn't created for man.
That's
Exactly.
right. That's right. So we really don't have to worry. Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
Good things are coming.
Amen.
We have prayed for 20 years or more that God would bring into the light what has been hidden in the darkness. And it's beginning to happen.
Yeah.
And as has been said before, when it does happen with more completeness, there are going to be many hundreds of thousands of people who are going to be more than just a little bit upset. And if you go back and read some of the history of the Reformation, you can get a little glimpse about what can happen. During the Reformation, a lot of priests were crucified by their people because they found out they had been lied to and truth had been withheld from them. And of course, all the abuses that were going on in the Catholic Church. Well, when it happens again, the results could be similar. And we have to be the salt that says, now wait a minute, we know that you are terribly upset because your loved one died as a result of something that they were compelled to do by the government. And you just as soon go out and do bad things to people that did those things. However, you have to understand that God is righteous and He's the righteous judge. And what He will do is worse than you can imagine. So just let Him do it. Praise God. There's more good than bad.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy what you had to say this morning. As a matter of fact, I've enjoyed every time you speak.
Amen.
And you just have a gift, a real gift. And I think that's practice listening to God. We fellows, and I speak just generally, have more difficulty than that with women. And as I've mentioned before, we usually wake up with a list in the morning. I mean, our engines are running. And of course, our wives help that out by saying, you know, you need to get this done and that done. And so we start off, you know, in high gear. And the trick is being able to slow down and say, listen, it's just like Chad Beach was saying. We have to listen. And that means, and we've all done this, I'm assuming that. I'm not the only one that says, Lord, what do you got for me today? Is that it? We have to say, I'm going to listen until you speak. And I'm not going to get out of this chair until I hear from you. And when we do that, expect to be tested. It goes beyond our patient level. But he always does.
Yes.
I have found, and I've told Jenny and I've related to others, as soon as I stop talking, he's usually faithful to start talking. Praise God.